this video, I would like to introduce to you the concept of industry-wide bargaining as a way to work towards a living wage in global supply chains. Let's start with some economics. What is the relationship between wage growth, productivity growth, and competition? A necessary, though not sufficient precondition for sustainable wage growth is productivity growth. Higher real income of workers is, at least on the medium and long run, impossible without a greater output per worker. Productivity growth is generated through constant modernization of the entire production process, through new technologies, new management methods, new products, and new forms of workplace organization. The Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter coined the term creative destruction as the permanent feature of capitalist economies. The whip of competition forces every entrepreneur to be part of this constant race of innovation and productivity growth. Though competition plays an important and indispensable role in a dynamic market economy, however, not all kinds of competition play this positive role. If an employer, for example, uses his power as an employer to demand unpaid overtime or to lower wages, he becomes more competitive at the expense of his workers and not because he has been innovative or has raised productivity. Unregulated competition will trigger a race to the bottom where each employer tries to become more competitive by lowering the wages of his employees. In such cases, higher profits or lower product prices are not the result of increased productivity, but merely a redistribution of income from wages to profits or to lower consumer prices. Employers, as a rule, have wage-setting power vis-à-vis individual workers. For individual employers, it is of course advantageous to get wages concessions from their workers. Workers, on the other hand, might feel that wage moderation is the only choice to keep their jobs, but such wage competition inevitably creates a downward spiral on wages. It sustains low wage, low productivity jobs instead of stimulating innovation and development. Fair and efficient competition means that all competitors should pay the same wage for the same work. However, as long as general wage agreements do not stop some employers to use their market power to lower wages, other employers can also not raise wages, and this would make them less competitive. Therefore, company-based collective bargaining offers only limited scope to improve the working conditions. Instead, setting the wage through an industry-wide collective bargaining agreement would make it impossible for individual employers to compete by lowering wages. It would also favor the most productive enterprises, as applying the same wage across the industry would ensure higher profit margins for more productive enterprises. Therefore, industry-wide bargaining speeds up the structural transformation towards more productive enterprises in the economy. What is needed to achieve industry-wide bargaining? There's a need for trade unions, in particular in well-organized factories, to support solidarity wages policies for all workers in the sector. For employers, industry-wide bargaining can be of interest because it reduces the risk of industrial unrest and stops often ruinous competition. From a government perspective, industry-wide bargaining protects workers and supports the transition to more productive employment. However, less productive enterprises will fiercely resist such a move because it would put them out of business. Employers as a whole might also prefer the unregulated market, not so much for economic reasons, but because it increases their power as an employer vis-à-vis the individual worker. But from a societal and developmental point of view, industry-wide bargaining can help to create a more productive industry, allow for fairer wages, and is a strong barrier against exploitative labor practices. What does this mean for global supply chains? The economic and social case for industry-wide bargaining is straightforward in a closed national economy. However, the situation changes within global supply chains, where buyers can move from country to country and national producers can easily be outcompeted by cheaper producers in other countries that are not bound by the same wage agreement. The garment sector is probably the most extreme case. The highly mobile garment industry has constantly relocated production to countries with the lowest wage, or at least has used the threat of relocation to exert a downward pressure on wages. This policy has not only kept wages down in producing countries, but also resulted in a transfer of most productivity gains towards international brands and to consumers in the north, as Pravin Jha has shown in an earlier lecture here. The current system of fierce competition has resulted in a relocation process where production goes to the cheapest place, while little or no respect for social or environmental standards is observed. Therefore, industry-wide collective bargaining in such a highly mobile sector dominated by global brands requires that together with the national unions and national employers, also global companies and their procurement practices become part of the bargaining process. Without such a triangular bargaining process, national producers risk to lose orders from international buyers as soon as the collectively agreed wages raise production costs. The accident at Rana Plaza, the growing social tensions in many garment-producing countries, and the human rights concerns of consumers are strong reasons to change the current practice. None of the actors, not even individual global brands, can implement lasting improvements in isolation. Industry-wide wage setting could be a solution, but for that, collective responsibility has to overcome individual free riding. This is what IndustriALL as a global union and a number of global brands try to achieve, and you can hear more about this in the next lecture.